So investment banking is notoriously competitive. Most people will apply through internships, and those acceptance rates are crazy low. This was the acceptance rate when I did my internship. I speak to prospective interns who are looking to get into banking, and they complain because they feel like their CV is not good enough. Sometimes I also speak to school students who are wondering what should they start doing so that they can prepare to be successful in the applications. So in this video, I'm basically going to go through my entire work experience prior to becoming a full-time investment banker. I will flag sort of the transferable skills, the pay, and whether or not it featured on my CV. Let's get into it. Okay, so my first ever jobs were sort of the miscellaneous, like babysitting or helping out with a family, friends, like business or whatever. For me, this tended to be sort of like catering or like events decorations, and of course like babysitting and stuff like that. So these jobs might seem irrelevant for getting into a high finance job, but I think there are a couple of things that I want to flag. So number one, adults had to see me as a responsible teenager. And number two, I had to be on people's radar. So obviously there's not infinite amount of jobs, especially in that sort of, family, friend, business sort of thing. So you need to be the person of choice. So for that meant, cozying up to certain adults or figuring out who the young person was who kept getting the jobs and how to cozy up to them so that they would refer me. And then, you'd be nice to them, you get onto one shift, you do a good job, bish bash bosh, you get another job. Now, this is a skill that's relevant for me at 15, but it's also terribly relevant at 25, at 35, because wherever you are in your career, you need to be someone who's visible, who's able to put themselves in the right rooms. These jobs probably average between £5 to £7 an hour, but look, at the time, that was good money. You were grateful for what you got. And no, none of those jobs were on the CV that I applied to for investment banking roles. So my first formal employment was at an event center. So basically where concerts are held, awards night, all that kind of stuff. I'd basically do a mixture of like waitressing, bartending, setting up, honestly anything that they needed. It was like a 0-hour contract, so basically just like whenever there was an event or whatever, you'd work. So it's great for me when I was in like high school, and it was a blast. The shifts were also quite interesting. So I'm pretty sure like before I turned 17, the shifts were capped at like midnight finishes. So most events, obviously it's like evening events, so the shift pattern would tend to be like 5 p.m. to midnight. Then as I think when I turned 17, it became like 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. So I guess it's sort of a weird, twisted way. I guess I was preparing myself for banking hours, or, well, not fully banking hours, but working into the early mornings at the age of like 16, 17. But no, the job was actually so fun. Like it was other sort of people in your age group and sometimes even like slightly older people. And like when you're working with people into late hours and it applies to investment banking, you honestly just get a sense of camaraderie because, sometimes people do get a little bit delirious and it gets a little bit funny. And honestly, the banter we would have at like 1 a.m. because we're like polishing knives. Was so good. But no, onto the transferable skill. I feel like for me, the lesson here was to be good in whatever job you're doing. So, when I was a junior, so, you start off as like the lowest rank or whatever, I'd always make sure to do a good job and make sure to take as many shifts as possible to show that I was keen and committed and stuff like that. And I actually ended up being like one of the youngest promoted. Like at the time, the people, so basically like the juniors would have like red aprons and then the seniors would have like blue aprons. So all of the people in blue aprons, I was like the youngest person by like a good few years. And yeah, this is something you can 100% put on your CV. Like I think people think that on the finance CV needs to be like, oh, I somehow at the age of 14 got work experience in a bank. That is so sus. And like, I think people know it's sus. They're like, oh, well, clearly like your parent just got you in. But if you can find sort of other experiences, but just make sure you do well in them. Like it is no secret that, like investment banks, when they're recruiting, they want excellent people. They want people who do well in whatever they're doing. Like as a matter of fact, investment banks are looking for the best people. So you can highlight that in different ways. So obviously the university you go to, the grades you went to, of course, but you can also highlight that in your work experiences. Like my job, it's like, hey, I worked in this event center, got some customer service skills, got some organization skills, and also I did so well that I was promoted early. Like that kind of stuff. So this did feature on my CV. The pay was about, gosh, I want to say like started off at like £8 an hour. And then when I was promoted, maybe like 9 or 10. But yeah. Okay, so my first ever like fixed contract part-time job was in a retail store. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say the name, but it was a quintessentially British store. And I was basically just like a retail assistant, I think is the word. Like you're just on the shop floor helping people and stuff like that. It was fun. I think I had like an 8-hour contract or whatever, but I always got overtime. I would say the transferable skills in here were being able to grin and bear it, because I hated that job. They're just very interesting characters. But again, that's more transferable skills. How do you work with people who are interesting that you may not love working with? Also, there's interesting dynamics because the store was actually shutting down. It's a whole thing, but like they knew the store was shutting down due to like some financial stuff, like the branch in my city. And so yeah, I think there was a lot of like passive aggressiveness due to that. It was a whole thing. But how do you navigate not so comfortable working experiences? The second thing was, it was the first job that I had KPIs and targets. So whether that is, okay, you need to try and upsell, the little things they put like around the tills. You should make sure you upsell X number of those in a week. We're really trying to push on the bags this week or whatever. So working with targets, I think that was the first time doing that. I don't think that's not exactly relatable to IB. You don't really, it's not like sales and trading, which I think has targets, but I think working in a pressured environment coming from the KPIs is definitely transferable. And I think being able to grin and bear it in work is definitely transferable to M&A. Like as much as I am always net positive about banking, like in any of my videos, you'll see that I'm always net positive. There are definitely times when you have to just put your head down and get through the trenches, because no matter how much you like your job, when you are sleep deprived and you're doing really late hours back to back, it's gonna get to you, okay? Or when you have to like cancel social plans, it's gonna get to you. So how do you build that muscle of like, it's fine, we're in pain, we're not having a slay time, but we're gonna put our head down and we're gonna like keep going, we're gonna still do a good job, we're gonna show up every day. That is totally a transferable skill. The pay probably similar, £8-9 an hour, and I did not put on my CV. Okay, now fast forward to the year before I moved to university. In this year, I was very big on working and just saving because I knew I was moving to London for university. So I worked, where did I work? So I continued to work at the event center. Then I worked in a stadium doing a similar role. I worked in a hotel. I worked in 2 hotels. Yes, I worked in 2 hotels. And then I worked in a perfume shop. So let's talk about the perfume shop experience. So this is my favorite part-time job by far. I just love perfumes, but also it was just a really good like working environment. There were also KPIs and targets, but this time they were tied with rewards. So whether that was bonuses like actual money or like perfume rewards. So it was honestly just such a good job. One of the best parts was that my manager was delightful. Like I'm still in touch with her, like we have a good relationship. The other staff, I would say they were quite interesting, but I think one of the cool things about working part-time when you are still in high school or teenager or whatever is you'll often be working with people who are a few years older than you. So like university students in your city who are looking to like make some money. And I think that's always such a privilege, like just observing people older, learning from the good things they've done and the not so good things they've done and trying to like do better on their experiences. Like I think that is something that you should, like, regardless of whatever job you want to do, you should always try and be in a part-time job where you have that set up, because you're basically like hacking the system. You're getting to learn from people steps ahead of you and you don't have to go through it yourself. Do you know what I mean? So I loved it for that. I think in terms of transferable skills, number one was sales. So we did have like KPIs and targets, like I mentioned. So it's like, it was actually like numerical values. I'm pretty sure like, okay, Melody, you need to sell X or was it me specifically? Maybe it was like the store. I think it was maybe the store. The store this week, we need to make like X thousands sort of situation. And then like, yeah, they're able to track like the days that had the most and who was working on those days. So like, yeah, you very much had ownership of like, okay, we got to make some money today. Like, so, you're open for the day and you're making sure to be like engaging and warm and upselling and stuff like that. I think that's a really, really important skill, because in being able to upsell, you must be a personable person and you must have good client facing like skills, which is definitely relevant for M&A. Obviously not so much when you're a junior. You might not have that much client exposure, but definitely as you get more senior. And I think it is a skill set that if you're able to flag on your CV or in your interviews, your interviewer will definitely appreciate. I think the second transferable skill was taking ownership, which is definitely linked to the fact that I was, there's a chance to get bonuses and rewards. That's really important in banking. Like, I would say it's quite a mature, so even when you get into banking as an analyst, even as an intern, like they want to see that you're someone who can take ownership and you're like mature in the way that you work, that you're not just like like I don't really care about the outcomes, I'm just going to do my bit and obviously like everyone else above will add value. Like no, they want you to see that like, okay, this is a piece of work that I'm involved in, how do I make sure this is the best piece of work? And that will involve, number one, just doing well in the ask, but number two, going above and beyond. And I think that was something I was able to practice when I worked in that perfume shop, because you want to go above and beyond to hit those targets, because the targets are never something you can just do coasting. It's always something that you have to push for. So whether that is thinking about, like, I remember like one of the things that I did was actually changing a little bit of the store layout, because I felt like some of the perfumes that were sort of selling well, that complemented with other things, putting them in front, like basically using my initiative and stuff that I was observing to think about, okay, how can this positively benefit the store? Being able to do that as someone who is 17, 18 is something that's really good to put on your CV and something that your interviewers will appreciate. It was also good to flag the whole customer facing element. Again, that's really relevant for investment banking. And lastly, I also loved the job because it just made me a little bit more interesting. Like I totally became the perfume person, like inside and outside of work. Like I'm the person who knows what fragrance you're wearing, what other fragrances you might like, what fragrance you should get for your girlfriend, your brother, like that kind of stuff. And like this is all relevant in the workplace. Like, yes, of course, work is all about how good you are at the job for sure. But it's also about how personable and interesting you are, and like, do people like being around you? And so yeah, like definitely like perfume can come up like when you're, you're sat across the desk, whatever, maybe it's getting to lunchtime, you're making small talk with your like person, with the person sitting next to you, with a senior, like whatever, like the work experience that you've had that shape you, that becomes sort of like your fun facts or whatever, these are totally relevant. Like you can banter with seniors on whatever topic that you are knowledgeable or passionate about. Like I want this video, like one of the aims of this video is just to like reassure people a little bit and to make you think a little bit bigger about how experiences might be relevant and how they can be helping you to set yourself up for this sort of dream high finance job that you have. Okay, so moving on to something a little bit more serious, I guess. So in my penultimate year of school, I had work experience at a corporate bank. Now, before you think this is not nepotism, this is not me, I have no connections in finance. The story is actually a little bit wacky and interesting. So my economics teacher, like in school, set up this like day talk session thing with this in-house economist at a bank. Now, this economist was not actually based in the city that I lived. He like trekked in, and so like he had to be hosted in someone else's offices. Now, that someone else ended up being like the head of corporate banking at that bank. So anyways, we have the talk or whatever. Then like afterwards, like I'm getting quite stressed because like everyone else like in my class managed to get like some experience, because like I think pretty sure my school like made us get experience. Like at some point they're like, you needed to do something, and I had nothing, and everyone else had like family connections stuff. So I was super stressed. So I was like, look, you know what? Let me just go to the bank and ask them, like, if they say no, I'm going to be the exact same position I was before, right? All about going for things, right? So yeah, I like walk into this Scottish corporate bank, the audacity, and I asked to speak to the guy that like hosted, because that's the only person I knew there. And so like I remember the receptionist just being a bit like, oh, do you have a meeting with him? I'm like, no, we had a school trip here last week, and I just had some questions, lol. She was like, okay. Luckily for me, it was around lunchtime. So well, actually, yeah, that's the only time I could leave school to go talk. So yeah, it had to be lunchtime, but that was also, fortunately, it was lunchtime, because the head of the corporate bank, was like kind of free. So he came out and just was talking to me, and I just basically asked him, I was like, look, yo, I'm okay. It wasn't that vibe. I was just like, hey, we had our meeting, whatever, super interesting. Thanks so much for hosting or whatever. I would really love some work experience. Like I'm really interested in finance, in banking or whatever. It'd be great if you guys have any sort of work experience or internships, anything like that. And he was like, oh no, lol, we don't. We have an apprentice program, but like that's about it. And I was like, okay, like, is there anything, like in the bank, any way you can help or whatever? And luckily for me, he was super kind, and he was like, yeah, let me think about it. Let me see what I can do. Long story short, he basically invents this like work experience program for me. Like it was 1 week. He like basically pieced it together himself. I was the only one. It was very, pieced together is the right word. It was very much like, oh, today you shadow me, tomorrow you shadow someone else if they're free, sort of situation. But it was an amazing experience, and I'm so, so grateful for it. Like, yes, it was bare bones, but I am super fortunate to be able to have got that. I'm really grateful to him. It gave me the chance to learn about corporate finance. I remember like my last couple of days, it was with like the corporate finance team who does like the valuation stuff and everything like that. Also just like other transferable skills, like working in an office is the first time that I was ever like, suited up in an office sort of vibe, working with like, mature finance professionals. So this was not a fancy finance investment banking experience at all. It was very bare bones, but I'm so grateful. Like I think I was just very fortunate to have just met a really kind person who's able to like help me out in that way. But yeah, in terms of transferable skills, well, actually in terms of just general benefits, it got me a good logo. Got me a good logo to slap on there in a good relevant division. And then also just transferable skills. I worked with like the corporate finance team in the last couple of days to just like learn sort of, basic accounting. I think I was 17 at the time. So it's really good to get the insight. Also just speaking with like older, finance professionals, and also just like miscellaneous things. Like this is another thing I want to flag with whatever work experience you get. There is always going to be little pieces of magic, let's say, in your work experience, like the people you meet that do end up shaping your life and helping you that you wouldn't have foreseen. So like it's never worth just dissing experiences because you never know. Like for example, in this work experience, I met this lovely lady. I think she was an executive assistant to like one of the like top people or whatever, and she had an English background, and she like volunteered to go over my personal statement. So like she's one of the people who like read through my personal statement, helped me to edit it, like, and that's the personal statement that got me into the London School of Economics, which played a pivotal role in me getting into investment banking. So like, yeah, you never know, like any work experience that you're getting, even if it's not the ideal that you want, there could be little bits of magic happening. So this was unpaid. I did put it on my CV, and I'm still in touch with like that head of corporate banking. So it's definitely helped me in terms of just like my network and stuff like that. Okay, now fast forward to university. So I did work part-time. So I studied economics at the LSE. My part-time job my first year was basically like being a student ambassador. So you basically would do tours. Yeah, you basically do tours for people looking to get into LSE. The pay was good. The pay was actually really good for what it was. Like, I can't remember, but I want to say like mid teens, like 14, 15 an hour. Good money, in my opinion. Good money. In my first year, I also did like societies and unpaid stuff but they also went on my CV in the like responsibilities and roles section or whatever. Okay, so now onto the more juicy part. So it was in my first couple months in my first year of university that I actually learned what investment banking was. And I was like, cool, I'm going to apply for it. So in your first year, it's sort of your spring weeks, which are your first year internships that happen in the spring, and they literally last a week. So spring week. So for me, I applied to a bunch, and I was very lucky to get a few. So I did them in the spring of my first year. For the rest of my first year, I didn't really work part-time because of the Panasonic, if you catch my drift. So the spring weeks, they were not paid. I think some of them, like, I think there are a couple that actually do pay you. I just didn't get into them. But yeah, none of mine were paid. So now fast forward, at the start of my second year of university, I applied to summer internships. I document the entire journey towards that, by the way. It's in the IBDiaries season 1. I will try and link it up here as well, but it's on my channel. So I was lucky enough to get a summer internship as well. And then for the rest of my second year, I basically did more of the student ambassador shifts. Nothing crazy. Again, the second wave of the Panasonic kind of affected me working part-time. Yeah, that's not a good year in terms of making money. But then the summer before my final year, so the summer after my second year, I interned in investment banking. You can find that in the IBDiaries season 3. And yeah, that was amazing. The pay for internships tend to range, I think, between 9,000 and like close to 11,000. So yeah, really good money for like 9 to 10 weeks basically. And yes, that absolutely did go on my CV. And then in my final year of university, I did like miscellaneous things. So I worked with the social media department. I don't even know, was that paid? If it was paid, I think it was paid per like video you did. But basically like LSE basically launched their like social media strategy. Like I'm featured on like their first TikTok video. Super fun. I also worked part-time with the finance department, like the academic finance department of the LSE. I basically helped them with like registers. Like they wanted to register their master students. So I'd be the one at the door being like, I'll register you or whatever. It was great. Good money as well, similar to like other things that I got paid at university. And that was amazing because I met really cool people. It was master students, a little bit older, so I got to meet people who, maybe had already worked in banking or had more experience than me. I actually made a really good friend there. So yeah, I also really loved it. I think that job's probably like top 3 part-time jobs I've ever done. It was really good, really flexible, and great manager as well. Okay, and we are drawing to the end, but basically I converted my internship into a full-time job. But before my full-time job started, I had like 6 weeks before my final exam and my banking job starting. So I basically did another internship in there. So I interned in a real estate asset management / private equity shop. It was amazing. A really good summer. A lot less hours than the banking internship I had done the summer before. So it just felt amazing. It was in Mayfair. It was the summer in London. My manager was amazing. And oh my gosh, I had like one of the amazing manager relationships that sort of transcend the professional dynamic. Like it was very personal. We'd talk about lots of different things. And yeah, she was just an absolute delight. And so I loved that experience. And yeah, I think that is a totally transferable skill. Like being able to convert what starts as a professional relationship into something that transcends is so special, because your career is so much bigger than maybe that one job that you're in. Like I think there's obviously statistics about how many jobs you'll switch. Like in your lifetime. And so yeah, having a relationship that person will be in your corner, support you and help you regardless of what you do. And then also just practically, like for me, I always think like, yeah, having older people is so special because like someone who's 20 years older than you can help you in thinking about your life more holistically. So yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things I took away, and just exercising that muscle was something that I was able to exercise when I then joined banking. And now I also have mentors who have definitely transcended that as well. So yeah, I really found that experience special for that reason. Pay was probably about 2/3 of what it was in investment banking. And yes, it did go on my CV and it's still on my CV. So yeah, then I ended that internship and went straight into my full-time M&A bulge bracket job in London in Canary Wharf. You can find a couple of videos on my channel where I sort of use interesting sort of ideas to discuss my experiences. Here's some thumbnails. But yeah. Okay, and I just wanted to end with some quick fire tips. So number one, try to do well in any role that you're doing. Like, I get it, yes, you're not in that finance role that you want, but how can you make sure you excel in what you're doing? Like, yes, you're working as a lifeguard, but how can you be the best lifeguard ever? How can you go above and beyond to create this training program to help the young kids that come to your swimming pool? I don't know. Like, just doing well in what you're doing, because banks, they want to hire good people. Like, it doesn't have to be someone who studies finance all day and but like, are you someone who is capable of excellence, who has demonstrated excellence in the past? That is what they're looking for. Like, doing well in a job, you can only benefit from that. So yes, continue to dream about your 6-figure high finance job, but make sure you're doing well in your cutesy part-time job as well. Why not? And the second thing is to be interesting. I think I've mentioned this quite a few times, but people want to work with interesting people. Think about your experiences in a way of like, how is this shaping me to be someone people would want to work with, to be someone who's personable, to be someone who has interesting stories. I think that's a really good way to reframe sort of the experiences that are stepping stones towards getting that high finance job. Okay, so I hope this video helped. Share this with someone who you think needs to hear this. All the best with this upcoming recruitment season. I hope my videos on my channel help you. But if you do need some coaching or extra support, there's an email in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.